My husband won the 30 million lottery and wanted a divorce. That night, I packed my bags and returned to my hometown. 2 weeks later, the heatwave struck and chaos ensued everywhere. I relaxed in my well-stocked rural villa, enjoying an ice cream bar. Meanwhile, my husband, with our son and his childhood sweetheart, was reduced to begging in the neighborhood, savoring the last drop of water they could find, reassuring himself, "I have money. Money can buy anything." I remembered how in my previous life, they locked me in the basement, where I died from dehydration. Money? First, try buying your own life. After dying from dehydration during the heat wave, I returned to the day my husband asked for a divorce. "Chloe is pregnant. I'm warning you, stop clinging." Ethan shouted at me, his spit flying. His childhood sweetheart, Chloe, hid behind him, offering candies to my son. As I felt the cool air from the air conditioning, the suffocating sensation of being burned alive during the heat wave dissipated. I took deep breaths of fresh air. Looking at Ethan's menacing face, I suppressed my growing hatred and agreed to the divorce without hesitation. He was taken aback, not expecting me to relent so easily, and looked at me suspiciously. "Really? You're not planning anything, are you?" I glanced at the calendar on my phone. Only 7 days until the heat apocalypse. Time was short. "We either go to City Hall now, or I walk away. Your choice, Ethan." My son, with a disdainful look, urged. "Who cares if she's planning something? This old woman isn't fit to be my mom. You need to divorce her, so I can recognize Chloe as my mom." Chloe gave Ethan a shy, coy look. Ethan shivered and eagerly drove us to City Hall. On the way, Ethan was grinning foolishly, while my son didn't even glance at me, nestled in Chloe's arms, full of attachment. I fought the urge to drive the car off the overpass with the three of them inside. In the last life, when the heatwave hit, Ethan and Chloe locked me in the basement, leaving me to suffer and die from the heat. This time, I swore they would pay for their blood debts. When dividing the assets, I only took my savings card, which had 400,000 yuan. Ethan couldn't help but boast, "Look how good I am to you. You've freeloaded for so many years, and I never asked for rent." Internally, I was full of scorn, controlling the urge to slap him. "Since you were so sensible and agreed to divorce, I'll give you an extra 100,000, so you don't end up scavenging on the streets." I gladly accepted the 100,000 yuan Ethan transferred. You can have issues with fools, but never with money. Besides, I knew Ethan was quite wealthy now. 3 days ago, he won a 30 million lottery prize. He wanted to live with Chloe before claiming the prize, so he schemed to divorce me. In my past life, I had no idea. I thought I had a decent husband and a third-grade son, so I tried to protect my family as much as possible. Until I saw Chloe posting intimate photos with Ethan on my Snapchat feed, with a caption, "After years apart, after life's twists and turns, it's still you." Ethan's smiling face in the photo was a stark contrast to his usual impatient demeanor. I thought of how the whole family treated me after Chloe returned. Ethan mocked me for always asking for money and having no self-respect. My elementary school son despised me for not letting him play video games or eat snacks, calling me a bad woman. In the previous life, I rushed to the scene, gave Chloe a slap, and called her a home-wrecking SL*T, only to be locked in the basement by them. One slap couldn't make up for the pain of being roasted alive. I wanted them to die 1,000 times more painfully than I did. After leaving City Hall, I watched as my son jumped into Chloe's arms. Ethan joyfully led them both away, the family of 3 laughing like they were on top of the world. Laugh now, but soon you won't be able to. Back home, I immediately began planning how to purchase supplies to protect myself. Halfway through my plan, Ethan returned with our son. Seeing his smug, satisfied expression, I guessed he had claimed the 30 million. I couldn't be bothered to deal with the two of them and continued drawing and writing on my tablet. My son ran over, shouting, "I want to go to Miami with Dad. Hurry up and pack our things. I'm not your nanny. Find someone else to do it." My son angrily threw a water cup at me. "You're my mom. You have to do everything for me, or I'll have Dad hit you." The shattered glass cut my leg. Looking at my son's righteous expression, I felt like killing this little brat. Before having him, I was a high-ranking executive. But because he couldn't be left alone, I became a stay-at-home mom for 10 years. In the last life, when the heat wave hit, they lived comfortably off the resources I stockpiled, while I was left to die in the basement. I begged my son for a way out, but to please Chloe, he blocked the basement vent, letting me pass out. I didn't die instantly. I watched them take a cleaver to me, heard them greedily shout, "Get a bowl to catch it. We can drink the blood. She's over 100 pounds, enough for us to drink for a while." My son jumped first to bite into my vein. Take a step back, and the sea will be vast. But the more I endured, the angrier I got. I slapped my son, swelling his cheek. He tried to bite me, yelling for me to go back to the countryside. I glanced at Ethan, who was watching the drama, and calmly said, "If you don't control the kid, I won't get the marriage certificate in 30 days. Only then did Ethan intervene. You gave birth to him. What's wrong with packing his clothes? Did I reproduce asexually? Ethan couldn't out-argue me, so he awkwardly packed some short sleeves and shorts, dragging our son, who made faces at me, out the door. He pretended to be affectionate, asking me to stay for a while. I didn't agree. The city apartment would soon lose water and power in the apocalypse, not only becoming useless, but also making us targets for neighbors. This time, let it be the Graham family's grave. Once Ethan and my son left, I wasted no time rummaging through the basement. During the 3 special years, I developed a habit of hoarding supplies. I had stored quite a bit of food in the basement. This time, I'm taking everything. 20 cases of bottled water? In the heat wave, water is most precious. Must take 7 bags of rice, flour, and oil. I went through hell to get these into the basement, so I'm taking them home. The vegetables growing on the balcony? They're my hard work. No way I'm leaving them for those jerks. Light summer clothes and quilts. Wear clothes and cover with quilts in the heat? I packed them into the donation box downstairs, leaving only long sleeves and thick quilts for the Grahams. I also picked up a hammer from the toolbox and gave the air conditioner a few whacks. The already broken unit let out a few whimpers. I hope the 3 of them have good endurance, wearing long sleeves at 149 degrees Fahrenheit, with nothing to eat or drink, and still thrive. While emptying the house, I spotted the familiar cleaver. My son loves meat, so I used it to chop bones. But in the past life, it became the tool they used to dismember me and drink my blood. After a moment's pause, I took it from the cabinet and placed it on the counter. Finally, I looked around the seemingly unchanged house, now empty of supplies. I ordered several surveillance cameras, installing them in hidden spots. Once everything was done, it was past 2 p.m. I didn't care about the heat outside and quickly drove back to my hometown with my things. I'm an orphan. My parents died when I was in high school, leaving me a plot of land. The villagers were kind, pooling together to support me through college. Before giving birth, I worked hard despite Ethan's objections, building a 3-story villa in my hometown. On the day it was completed, I went door to door, bowing and repaying the money. When the foundation was laid, most villagers helped. They used the best materials and installed 8 solar panels. To avoid potential wild animals from the mountains, they even set up an electric fence around the house. Afraid I'd neglect it for long periods, the villagers planted vegetables and dug a well, maintaining it often. Even though it was 95 degrees Fahrenheit, I stood in the garden full of fruits, laughing out loud. Thanks to my stubbornness back then, this well-equipped countryside villa by the mountains is my strongest support against the heat apocalypse and my hope for rescuing villagers. With a week left until the apocalypse, I began checking the villa's hardware. I contacted workers to install a water filtration system and bought several home-use large batteries and power banks. Even if the solar panels broke, I could manage with self-generated power. Enough cooling sources were needed. Though the house came with a complete ventilation system, I bought 7 or 8 stand fans, pairing them with humidifiers to ensure comfort during the apocalypse. With just a week left until the apocalypse, I began assessing the condition of my cottage's hardware. I reached out to workers to set up a water filtration system and purchased several large home batteries and power banks. This way, even if the solar panels fail, I can still rely on alternative power sources. I also need sufficient cooling options. Although my house is equipped with a complete ventilation AC system, I wasn't completely reassured, so I bought 7 or 8 stand fans and matching humidifiers to ensure I can stay cool even after the world ends. The home freezers weren't enough. I bought an entire row of commercial freezers from the shelves, placing 3 on each floor of the basement. Thankfully, my house is spacious enough, so storing all this equipment didn't make it feel cramped. After reviewing my home's layout, I ordered 5 extra-large water barrels for home fish tanks, a row of breeding cages, and a set of indoor gardening tools. I arranged for the workers to deliver these the next day. After purchasing all these items, I found myself out of money. I didn't hesitate and quickly downloaded loan apps on my phone, borrowing nearly $1 million from them. By the time the water filtration system was installed, it was already late at night. I hastily ate a meal and lay in bed to rest, preparing for the challenges ahead. The next day, I started stocking up on essentials. Not knowing how long the extreme heat apocalypse would last, I bought items focusing on quantity rather than cost. At the market, I purchased dozens of cattle, sheep, pigs, and chickens, asking the vendors to butcher and sort them. I also bought a batch of easy-to-raise rabbits and Chinese quail, planning to keep them in a small compartment on the third floor as fresh meat reserves. I stocked up on heat-resistant vegetable seeds and fertilizers in large quantities. With more time on hand, I rushed to the wholesale supermarket. I got 400 pounds each of rice and flour and ordered 500 barrels of bottled water. Various seasonings were tossed into the shopping cart by the box. I also bought a lot of instant rice and mini hot pots. In case cooking wasn't possible, these could still provide sustenance. Considering there was still time before the apocalypse, I ordered dozens more boxes of snacks, drinks, and fruits, along with various daily necessities and kitchenware. I practically cleared out entire shelves. The cashier was shocked at checkout, so I told him these were for donations. He then happily arranged for a vehicle to deliver my supplies back to the village. After leaving the supermarket, I went to the local fish pond. I bought 10 each of 5 easy-to-raise fish species, as well as some fry, planning to throw them into the fish tanks for breeding. Passing by a clothing store, I packed up lightweight quick-dry clothes and some winter clothes for unforeseen needs. Lastly, I headed into a pharmacy, buying dozens of boxes of every type of medicine, especially those targeting heatstroke, dehydration, and mosquito bites. Driving a 7-seater, it took me 3 trips to move everything back home. After finishing all this, I opened my phone to check on Ethan's family. Opening social media, I saw Ethan's close-up. It was clear they were having a great time in Miami, staying at a luxury hotel that cost thousands a night and enjoying freshly caught seafood. Even their son received a full set of electronics from Chloe. Watching the 3 of them so carefree, I couldn't help but smile with a sense of detachment. Enjoy your last grand celebration. The contrast was almost comical. On my phone screen, the bright, saturated colors of Miami's beaches popped against the dark, cool interior of my newly reinforced villa. In one photo, my son, Leo, was holding up a brand new, top-of-the-line tablet, his face twisted into that familiar, arrogant smirk I had tolerated for far too long. Thanks to Annie Chloe, I don't have to study anymore. We're going to live in Miami forever, his caption read, littered with laughing emojis. Underneath, Ethan had commented, "My boy deserves the best. Only the best for my family." I let out a soft, dry laugh, my fingers sliding to close the app. Family. I looked around my living room. The thick, triple-paned insulated glass windows had been successfully installed, shutting out the rising summer heat. Outside, the thermometer on my porch already read 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, a temperature that would have been uncomfortable in previous years, but was merely the gentle prelude to the furnace that was about to ignite. With only 4 days left until the official onset of the extreme heat dome, I had no time to waste on bitterness. I needed to ensure my sanctuary was absolute. The next morning, the delivery trucks arrived. The quiet, winding roads of my childhood village were temporarily blocked by 3 massive flatbed vehicles, carrying my commercial freezers, water tanks, and heavy-duty battery packs. Sister Lin, a loud, cheerful voice called out. It was Uncle Zhang, the village chief. He was a sturdy man in his late 50s, his face weathered by decades of farming. He had been one of the first to contribute to my college fund when my parents passed away. What's all this? Are you opening a supermarket in the mountains? I wiped the sweat from my brow, offering him a warm, genuine smile. Unlike the cold, transactional city I had just escaped, these people carried the warmth of humanity. Uncle Zhang, actually, I want to talk to you and the rest of the village, I said, pulling him into the shaded porch of my villa. I handed him a chilled bottle of herbal tea, which he accepted with a grateful sigh. Have you been watching the international weather reports? I asked, my tone turning serious. Uncle Jean blinked, taking a long sip of the tea. The weather? Well, the old folks have been saying the cicadas are louder than usual this year. And the water has been slightly lower. But it's summer, Lin. It's always hot. It's not going to be a normal summer, I said, leaning in. I had carefully prepared a cover story. A friend of mine works for the National Meteorological Bureau. She leaked some confidential data to me. An unprecedented, catastrophic heat dome is settling over our region. The temperatures are projected to exceed 140 degrees Fahrenheit. The power grids in the major cities will collapse within 48 hours of its arrival. Uncle Zhang's smile faltered. He looked at me, searching my face for any sign of a joke. Finding none, his expression hardened. 140 degrees? Lin, that's desert heat. People can't survive that. Exactly, I said. The concrete buildings in the city will turn into ovens. There will be no water, no electricity, and no food deliveries. That's why I returned. But I can't just save myself. The villagers helped me when I had nothing. I want to help you now. I took out a detailed list I had written the night before. Uncle Zhang, we have for days. We need to act immediately. First, we must dig the village wells deeper and install manual hand pumps in case the local power grid fails. Second, every household needs to stock up on flour, rice, salt, and most importantly, medical supplies for heat stroke. Third, we need to create shaded, subterranean shelters. The old root cellars dug into the hillsides. We need to clear them out, reinforce them, and stock them with water. When the air outside is burning, the earth underground remains relatively cool. Uncle Zhang stood up, his hands trembling slightly as he held the list. The authority in my voice, combined with the massive piles of supplies arriving at my villa, lent an undeniable weight to my words. I'll call a town hall meeting tonight, he said, his voice grave. Lin, if you're right, you're saving all our lives. Just promise me one thing, Uncle Zhang. I added, my eyes cold. Do not tell anyone outside the village about what we are doing. When the chaos starts, desperate people from the city will flee to the countryside. If they know we have water and food, we will become targets. He nodded solemnly. I understand. The mountains protect us, but only if we keep our mouths shut. Over the next 72 hours, the village of Greenstone became a hive of quiet, frantic activity. Under the guise of a drought preparedness drill, the villagers worked tirelessly. Old root cellars were cleared of debris, reinforced with wooden beams, and stocked with hundreds of gallons of water. The local blacksmith worked overtime to craft manual pumps for the 3 major wells. Meanwhile, inside my villa, the transformation was complete. My basement was now a high-tech bunker. 3 massive commercial freezers hummed quietly, packed to the brim with frozen meats, vegetables, and blocks of ice I had made using the remaining city power. 5 extra-large water barrels, fully filtered, stood against the wall. On the 3rd floor, I had set up the breeding cages. The Chinese quail were already laying eggs, and the rabbits were settling into their new environment, munching on dried alfalfa. My indoor gardening setup, lit by energy-efficient LED grow lights powered by my solar batteries, was already showing green shoots of heat-resistant spinach and cherry tomatoes. On the night of the 6th day, the air grew incredibly still. The usual evening breeze was entirely absent. The air felt thick, heavy, and hot, like standing in front of an open oven. The cicadas, which had been screeching for weeks, suddenly fell completely silent. I stood on my balcony, looking down at the village. Every house had its heavy wooden shutters closed. The electric fence surrounding my villa hummed with a low, protective vibration. I looked at my phone. The outdoor temperature at midnight was 104 degrees Fahrenheit. It had begun. Day 1 of the heat wave. I woke up not to the sound of an alarm, but to the dry, crackling heat that seemed to seep through even my thick, insulated walls. I checked the digital thermometer on my bedside table. Indoor temperature, 71.6 degrees Fahrenheit. Outdoor temperature, 116.6 degrees Fahrenheit. Time, 8 a.m. The air conditioning system in my villa hummed smoothly, drawing power from the massive lithium battery banks that had been fully charged by the solar panels. During the previous days, I walked down to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of ice-cold milk, and opened my laptop to check the external surveillance cameras. And the news. The local news networks were already in a state of mild panic. An unprecedented extreme weather event has struck the province, the anchor announced, her forehead shiny with sweat despite the studio's cooling systems. Temperatures in the metropolitan area have reached an all-time high of 118 degrees Fahrenheit. The state grid has issued a level 1 orange alert warning citizens to limit electricity usage to prevent a total grid collapse. Residents are advised to stay indoors. I scrolled past the official announcements to the local social media forums. The panic there was much more raw. Is anyone else's power flickering? My AC keeps shutting off. The convenience store down my street is completely out of bottled water. People are fighting over the last cases of cola. The asphalt on the main highway is starting to melt. A bus got stuck because its tires literally sank into the road. I took a sip of my milk, feeling a cold, satisfying chill run down my throat. Then I opened my private surveillance app. The camera I had hidden in the smoke detector of my old city apartment hummed to life. The apartment was empty. Ethan, Chloe, and Leo were still in Miami, likely, enjoying their air-conditioned luxury suite, oblivious to the fact that their home city was turning into a literal pressure cooker. By 2 p.m., the outdoor temperature peaked at an astonishing 127.4 degrees Fahrenheit. I stood by my window, looking out through the heat-reflective glass. The air outside was warping, creating heavy, shimmering mirages over the concrete driveway. A wild bird tried to fly across my yard, but halfway through it, suddenly fluttered weakly and fell directly to the ground, dead from instant heat stroke before it even hit the grass. In the village, everything was dead silent. The villagers were hiding in their deep-root cellars or the cool stone basements of their homes, surviving on the water and food they had hoarded. Day 3 of the heat wave. The news was no longer broadcasting. The television screen showed only static, and the internet connection was starting to stutter as major data centers in the city overheated and failed. I switched my laptop to a local satellite signal I had set up. The reports were apocalyptic. The city's power grid had completely collapsed. Without electricity, the high-rise apartments turned into vertical coffins. The concrete walls, which had absorbed the intense heat for 3 days, began to radiate it inward, creating a literal kiln effect. Water pumps in the high-rises failed instantly. Millions of people were trapped on upper floors with no running water and no cooling. It was on this day that my phone buzzed. It was a text message from Ethan. "Are you still at the apartment?" The flights from Miami were all canceled, so we had to charter a private emergency transport back. We just landed at the regional airport. "Why aren't you answering your phone?" I stared at the screen, a cold smile spreading across my face. They were back. The journey from the airport to the city apartment must have been a descent into hell. Through my hidden cameras, I watched the front door of the apartment finally swing open at 9 p.m. on the 4th day of the heat wave. A wave of hot, stagnant air rushed into the camera's field of view as Ethan, Chloe, and Leo stumbled inside. They looked unrecognizable. The tanned, glamorous vacationers from the Miami photos were gone. Ethan's expensive linen shirt was soaked in sweat, clinging to his chest, and his face was red and blistered from the heat. Chloe's designer sunglasses were askew, her expensive makeup smeared across her face like a horror movie villain, her hair matted and damp. Leo was crying hysterically, dragging his feet. "It's so hot." "Dad, why is it so hot? Turn on the AC." "I want ice cream." "Shut up, Leo." Ethan snapped, his voice hoarse and cracked. He slammed his heavy leather suitcase onto the floor. The elevators were down. We had to carry these bags up 18 flights of stairs in a 120-degree stairwell. "Do you think I'm not hot?" "Ethan, honey, please," Chloe whimpered, collapsing onto the sofa. She immediately let out a sharp shriek and jumped back up. The leather sofa, having absorbed the stagnant heat of the 130 degrees Fahrenheit apartment for days, was hot enough to burn bare skin. "Why is the apartment so hot?" Chloe cried, clutching her legs. "Didn't you leave the AC on?" "I did," Ethan muttered, stumbling toward the wall-mounted thermostat. He tapped the screen frantically, but the display remained dark. "The power is out. The whole damn building is dark." "Use the backup generator," Chloe insisted. "This is a luxury building. They must have backup power." The guard at the gate said the generator blew up 2 days ago because it overheated. Ethan yelled, his panic finally breaking through his arrogant facade. He ran to the kitchen sink and turned the faucet. A dry, wheezing hiss escaped the pipe. Not a single drop of water came out. "No water either?" Ethan's voice trembled. He grabbed his phone, but the signal bar showed a hollow no service. "Damn it, what is going on? We have 30 million yuan. Why is nothing working?" "Dad, I'm thirsty," Leo screamed, kicking the kitchen cabinet. "I want water." "Auntie Chloe, give me water." "Go ask your mother." Chloe snapped, her maternal facade completely evaporating under the pressure of the heat. She glared at Ethan. "Where is that useless ex-wife of yours? Didn't you say she always keeps this place stocked? Tell her to bring us water." Ethan blinked, a sudden look of hope crossing his face. "Right. The basement. She always hoards things down there during the winter and spring. She must have cases of water and food." He grabbed a flashlight from his bag and rushed out of the apartment, dragging Leo and Chloe behind him. They couldn't bear to stay in the stifling, airless apartment anyway. Through the building's security feed, which I had tapped into before leaving, I watched them stumble down the dark, suffocating basement stairs. The basement of the apartment building was subterranean, making it slightly cooler than the upper floors, but it was still a humid, breathless 105 degrees Fahrenheit. Ethan ran to our designated storage unit, padlock shut. "Open it. Hurry," Chloe urged, wiping the sweat from her eyes. Ethan took out his key, his hands shaking so violently he dropped it twice. Finally, he unlocked the heavy metal door and threw it open. The beam of his flashlight cut through the darkness, illuminating empty concrete. The shelves were bare. The floor was swept clean. The 20 cases of bottled water, the 7 bags of rice, the flour, the canned goods, everything I had painstakingly accumulated over the years, were gone. The only thing left in the entire storage room was a single, rusted cleaver, sitting squarely in the middle of an empty wooden shelf. The metal blade caught the beam of the flashlight, glinting with a cold, menacing light. Ethan froze. Where is everything?" Chloe whispered, her voice cracking. "Ethan said she had enough food to last a year. She took it," Ethan muttered, his eyes wide with a mixture of shock and dawning horror. "She cleared it out. Every single thing." Leo ran into the unit, looking around frantically. He spotted the cleaver and shivered, stepping back. "Dad, where's the water? I'm going to die. I'm so hot. That bitch." Ethan suddenly roared, his voice echoing off the concrete walls. She knew this was going to happen. That's why she divorced me so easily. She took everything and left us here to die. He kicked an empty cardboard box, sending it flying against the wall. "I'll kill her. I swear to God, when I find her, I'll kill her." Watching the screen from my cool, air-conditioned living room, I took a bite of my chocolate-dipped ice cream bar. The rich, sweet cream melted on my tongue. "Kill me?" I whispered to the empty room, my eyes fixed on Ethan's furious, sweating face on the monitor. "First, try surviving the night." By the 6th day, the heat wave had reached its terrifying peak. The temperature outside my villa in the mountains was 136.4 degrees Fahrenheit. In the concrete jungle of the city, the urban heat island effect pushed the temperature even higher, reaching a lethal 149 degrees Fahrenheit. At this temperature, the human body cannot cool itself through perspiration. Without artificial cooling, heat stroke sets in within hours, followed by rapid organ failure and death. In the city apartment, the situation had descended into absolute savagery. The hidden camera showed the 3 of them huddled in the dark living room. The windows were shut tight, but the glass was hot to the touch. They had stripped down to their underwear, their skin covered in angry heat rashes and blisters. Ethan's 30 million yuan lay in a leather bag on the dining table, stacks of neat, red bills that were now completely worthless. 2 days ago, Ethan had ventured outside, desperate to buy water. He had returned 3 hours later, empty-handed, his skin severely sunburned and his lips split open. The local supermarkets had been looted to the ground. The streets were littered with abandoned cars and the bodies of those who had tried to flee on foot. There was no one left to sell anything. Money had lost all meaning. The only currency of any value was water. "Ethan," Chloe croaked, her voice barely a whisper. She lay on the tiled floor, trying to absorb the last lingering coolness of the concrete. "We have to leave. We can't stay here. We'll die." "Go where?" Ethan rasped. He was sitting with his back against the wall, clutching his knees. The car's engine overheated and blew a gasket. "The streets are blocked. We can't walk a block in this heat without collapsing." "Your ex-wife," Chloe muttered, her eyes vacant. "Her hometown. She went to the countryside, didn't she?" "The countryside has wells. It has shade. It has trees. It's 300 miles away." Ethan shouted weakly. "How are we supposed to get there?" Suddenly, Leo let out a weak whine. "Dad, I want water. Auntie Chloe has water. I saw her." Ethan froze. He slowly turned his head to look at Chloe. Chloe's eyes widened in panic. She instinctively reached for her designer handbag, clutching it to her chest. "Chloe," Ethan said, his voice dropping to a dangerous, low pitch. "What is he talking about?" "Nothing. He's hallucinating," Chloe cried, her voice trembling. "The kid is crazy from the heat." "I'm not crazy," Leo screamed, his face red with effort. "I saw her. She has a small thermos in her bag. She drank from it when you went to the bathroom." Ethan stood up. The movement was slow, agonizing, but there was a terrifying intensity in his eyes. the doting, loving husband, who had promised Chloe the world, was entirely gone, replaced by a desperate, dying animal. "Give me the bag, Chloe," Ethan said, taking a step forward.
No.
"Ethan, please. It's only a little bit of water. It's for me," Chloe cried, tears cutting clean lines through the dirt on her face. "You said you loved me. You said you'd protect me. I loved you when I had 30 million and the world was normal," Ethan roared, lunging forward. "Right now, that water is my life." The two of them clashed on the living room floor, scratching, biting, and screaming. It was a pathetic, brutal struggle. Ethan, though weakened by dehydration, was still stronger. He pinned Chloe to the ground ruthlessly, striking her face until she let go of the bag. He ripped the bag open, pulling out a small, stainless steel thermos. He unscrewed the cap. There was barely 2 ounces of lukewarm water left inside. Without a second thought, Ethan poured the water down his own throat, ignoring the desperate cries of his son and the sobbing of his childhood sweetheart.
Ah.
Ethan gasped, clutching his throat as the tiny amount of moisture did nothing to quench his deep, systemic thirst. He threw the empty thermos at Chloe, hitting her in the forehead. She lay on the floor, bleeding slightly, staring at him with pure hatred. "You monster," she whispered. "Watching this play out on my screen, I felt a deep, profound sense of peace.
In
my previous life, these were the people who had locked me in the dark basement, listening to my screams for water while they drank iced wine upstairs. Now, the lock was of their own making, and the key was nowhere to be found." Day 9 of the heat wave. The local cellular towers, surprisingly, briefly flared back to life. A temporary emergency broadcast system had been established by the local government, sending out a weak signal to warn citizens that rescue operations were being organized, though no timeline was given. Along with the emergency broadcast, my phone lit up. A series of missed calls and frantic text messages from Ethan flooded my screen. I sat at my dining table, enjoying a fresh salad of cherry tomatoes and cucumbers from my indoor garden, paired with a glass of ice-cold sparkling water. I pressed the call button on Ethan's contact. It rang 3 times before being picked up. "Hello," I said calmly. "Lynn?
Lynn.
Is that you?" Ethan's voice was a wet, desperate wheeze. He sounded like he was speaking with a throat full of sand. "Thank God, you're alive. You have to help us." "Help you?" I asked, swirling the ice in my glass. The sound of the ice cubes clinking against the glass was incredibly loud over the receiver. I heard a sharp, ragged gasp on the other end. Ethan had clearly recognized the
sound.
Are you drinking ice water?" he whispered, his voice trembling with an agonizing mix of envy and disbelief.
"How?
"Where are you?" "I'm in my countryside villa, Ethan," I said, my voice smooth and relaxed.
"The
one you mocked me for building. The one you said was a waste of money, because only peasants live in the dirt." "Lynn, please," Ethan begged, his voice cracking into a sob. "I was wrong. I was a fool. I'll give you the money. All of it. The 30 million yuan, it's yours. I'll transfer it to you right now. Just send someone to get us. Or tell me where. You hid the water in the city. 30 million? I laughed softly. "Ethan, have you tried buying a bottle of water with your 30 million? How does it taste? Is it refreshing?" "Lynn, think of Leo," Ethan screamed, his voice turning shrill. "He's your son. He's dying. He hasn't had water in 36 hours. He's unconscious. You can't let your own son die." I looked at the surveillance monitor. In the corner of the living room, Leo was indeed lying on a pile of dirty
clothes.
But he wasn't unconscious. He was staring at the ceiling with dull, empty eyes. But I also remembered the previous life. I remembered the feel of his small, chubby hands wrapping around my neck, pinning me to the floor of the basement while Chloe laughed. I remembered him, blocking the basement vent, smiling as he said, "You're a bad mom anyway.
Auntie,
Chloe is going to buy me a Nintendo Switch." I remembered the terrifying sight of him holding the cleaver, his eyes filled, not with childish innocence, but with a greedy, feral hunger as he shouted, "Get
a bowl.
Let me drink first." "My son," I said, my voice dropping to a freezing whisper. "My son died in a dark basement a long time ago. The thing in your apartment is just a monster you." And Chloe raised. What? What are you talking about?" Ethan whimpered. "Do you remember the cleaver in the basement storage room, Ethan?" I asked. There was a long pause on the line. How did you know about the cleaver?" Ethan whispered, his voice suddenly thick with terror. Because in my last life, you used it on me, I said. You, Chloe, and Leo. You drank my blood to survive the heat wave. But this time, there is no meat for you to chop. There is no blood for you to drink. You're crazy. You're absolutely insane. Ethan screamed. Enjoy your 30 million, Ethan, I said, my finger hovering over the end call.
Button.
Buy yourself a nice, expensive grave.
No.
Lynn.
Wait.
Please. I clicked the button, terminating the call. Then I blocked his number.
Permanently.
With the phone lines dead and any hope of rescue gone, the final remnants of humanity vanished from the apartment. Through the hidden cameras, I watched the final act of their tragedy unfold. It was the 10th day of the heat wave. The indoor temperature of the apartment had reached 138 degrees Fahrenheit. The air was so dry that any moisture in the room had long since evaporated. Chloe was the first to completely lose her mind. She stood up, her eyes wild and bloodshot, and stumbled toward the kitchen.
She
Picked up the rusty cleaver, which Ethan had brought up from the basement the day before, and stared at it. She turned to look at Leo, who was shivering despite the intense heat his body in the final stages of severe heat stroke. He's useless, Chloe whispered, her voice carrying clearly through the high-definition microphone of the camera. He's just consuming the air.
He's
taking up space. She took a step toward the boy. Before she could reach him, Ethan lunged from the shadows. He had been watching her like a hawk, his own mind warped by dehydration and survival instincts. He didn't protect his son out of love. He did it because he saw Chloe as a threat to his own survival. He grabbed Chloe's wrist, twisting it until she dropped the cleaver. They fell to the floor in a flurry of limbs, scratching and tearing at each other's skin. Without the strength to fight properly, it was a slow, agonizingly brutal struggle. Ethan managed to get his hands around Chloe's throat. He squeezed with all the remaining strength in his dehydrated body, his face contorted into a monstrous mask of rage. Chloe thrashed, her fingers clawing at his eyes, but her movements grew weaker and weaker until finally she fell still. Her eyes, wide and glassy, stared directly into the hidden camera in the ceiling. Ethan collapsed next to her body, panting heavily. He didn't cry.
He didn't show
remorse. He simply crawled over to the dining table, grabbed a handful of the 30 million yuan bills, and began stuffing them into his mouth, chewing frantically in some delusional state of madness, as if the paper could somehow save him. 2 hours later, Leo let out his final, shuddering breath. Ethan was the last to go. He crawled back to the sofa, clutching his chest. He looked around the empty, scorching apartment, his eyes landing on the pile of thick wool blankets and down jackets I had left in the closet. In his final, delirious moments, his body's temperature regulation failed completely. He began to feel freezing cold, a common symptom of extreme, terminal heat stroke. With trembling hands, he dragged the heavy winter quilts over his body, wrapping himself tightly in the thick wool. He lay there, buried under the heavy winter gear in a 140-degree room, suffocating in the heat of his own making. Before he closed his eyes for the last time, he looked toward the kitchen counter, where the rusted cleaver lay glinting in the dark. A single tear of sweat ran down his cheek, vaporizing almost instantly in the
dry, hot air.
3 months later, the extreme heat wave finally began to recede. The heavy, oppressive heat dome drifted away, replaced by cool autumn winds and much-needed rain. The world that emerged from the furnace was vastly different. The cities were largely empty, devastated by the loss of life and infrastructure. It would take decades for humanity to rebuild. But in the village of Greenstone, the story was different. Thanks to the early warnings and the coordinated preparations, not a single villager had died. The root cellars had kept them cool, the deep wells had provided clean water, and the hoarded food had kept them fed. Today, the village was bustling with life. The air was a crisp, cool 65 degrees Fahrenheit. I stood in my garden, harvesting a basket of fresh, plump tomatoes and green
beans.
The electric fence was turned off, and the gates of my villa were wide open. Sister Lin. I looked up to see Uncle Zhang walking up the driveway, followed by several other villagers. They were carrying crates of fresh mountain walnuts and wild honey. We brought you the first harvest of the autumn, Uncle Zhang said, his face beaming with a deep, profound respect. We couldn't have done it without you, Lin. You saved our families. We did it together, Uncle Zhang, I said, accepting the honey with a smile. Community survives when people look out for one another. That's true, he agreed, looking around my beautiful, thriving villa. By the way, did you ever hear back from your ex-husband's family? The ones in the
City.
I set the basket down and looked toward the distant mountains. No, I said quietly. They decided to stay in the city. They thought their money could protect them. Uncle Zhang sighed, shaking his head. Fools. In times like these, money is nothing but paper. You can't drink gold, and you can't eat silver. No, I agreed, my eyes peaceful and clear. You really can't. After the villagers left, I walked inside my warm, cozy kitchen. I began to prepare a quiet, simple dinner for myself. The nightmare of my past life was finally over. The blood debt had been paid in full, not by my hands, but by the very greed and selfishness that had defined
Them.
I took a bite of a sweet, juicy tomato, enjoying the crisp, refreshing taste of a life truly reclaimed.